Christian, let's talk some Florida State Seminoles, my man. And I'm going to start off with the offense here real quick, Christian. I want to talk about how good was that offense last year, man? It was great, especially when Jordan Travis was healthy. We know what happened. I'm not going to get into the whole Florida State thing of last year, but that offense was awesome. 34.6 points per game. That was top 20 in the country last year. That was actually even higher before Travis did get hurt. They were putting up close to 40, believe it or not. So here's the problem, though. We know this. Anybody that follows Florida State lost a ton of production last season. Jordan Travis, obviously, who I just mentioned. Keon Coleman's off the NFL, their stud wide receiver. Johnny Wilson, he's off to the NFL as well. Trey Benson, their running back, off to the NFL. A lot of big pieces there to fill this season. They returned 55% of their starters, which, I mean, is probably average for most teams, but a team that obviously went undefeated last year in the regular season, which is pretty unheard of in today's college football world. So here's the deal, though. They did pick up the big transfer, right? DJ, I can never say his last name. I'm not even going to try. We know he played at Clemson, kind of got ran out the door there, had the year at Oregon State last year. I thought he looked okay. I thought he looked better probably. How's he going to fit Florida State's offense with Mike Norvell? I think he's going to fit really, really well into that scheme. I think he'll – do I think he's going to be Jordan Travis? Probably not quite, but I think he's a good quarterback. Christian, we know he's played a ton of football. So here's the other deal, though. I just mentioned the wide receivers leaving. They got huge questions at wide receiver this year. The leading returning receiver, I think, is Ja'Kai Douglas. He had like 14 catches and 243 yards. That's all they get back as far as production goes at the wide receiver spot. He did shine last year in a couple games. I think it was most notably the Pittsburgh game and the Florida game. He had a couple really big games and looked really, really good. They did also add Malik Benson, Jalen Brown, who both ran sub 11 100-meter dashes in the track field. These guys are burners. That'll help Florida State on the outside a little bit. But I think probably the best one is that Hakeem Williams kid. And I think he was signed in 2023 and he got hurt last season, didn't play much. But he's a former top 50 recruit. So I think you're going to see him out on the field. I think Florida State will have a little bit of a tough time, but I think over the season they're going to get better, especially offensively when those guys get reps, and we know how that works. So as far as the offense goes, like I said, they got some big shoes to fill. And like I said, we know what the defense did last year. Christian, I'm going to let you enlighten us on that defense this year.
Yeah, Chris, look, Florida State had a top 30 defense last year, right? And they should have been in the playoffs. Let me say that right now. They should have been in the playoffs, right? But look, with that being said, I mean, you're absolutely right. They lost a ton on both sides of the ball, but I think, they can be just as good this year, right? I think they can be just as good this year. It's going to take them some time, but they'll gel together. They're going to be all right. Look, Chris, for me, it starts up front for the Seminoles, right? Defensive end Patrick Payton, all right? He's going to look to add on his 7 sacks he had last year. Also, fellow D lineman Josh Farmer had 5 sacks last year as well. That's nothing to scoff at. I think they can add on to those numbers. To me, the biggest addition up front has to be UGA transfer Marvin Jones, right? He played sparingly for Georgia, but he's still a 5-star talent, and he has all the talent in the world. And I think he's going to benefit from getting more playing time at Florida State. The linebackers are going to be led by DJ Lundy, who had 54 tackles, 2 sacks, and an interception last year. Okay, he's going to be pretty damn good for him again this year. The secondary is going to be led by safety Shaheem Brown and cornerback Fintrell Cypress. Okay, I look for both those guys to have a pretty good season. They're mixing some guys in that they've gotten in the transfer portal. They got a couple of guys from Alabama, a ton of guys actually from Alabama have come over to play for this Florida State team. I think on defense, I do think that they can still be a top 30 defense this year as well. Looking ahead here, we're going to jump into a record prediction for Florida State, Chris. I'll give it to you right as they go. I've got them going 11-1.
Woo!
Okay, 11-1. Look, I think Georgia Tech, I think they're going to be an improved team, but I don't think they're going to be enough to beat Florida State. Boston College, they were the feel-good story last year. I feel like a feel-good story for a couple of weeks last year. Give me Florida State in that one. Memphis and Cal, absolutely not. They get to play both of them at home. So again, like we said, they have time to get adjusted to who they're playing. They're playing SMU. Again, SMU, not a bad program. You're playing a top 5, top 10 team in the country, at home. How much is that really going to mean? Not too much. Then you turn around, you get to play Clemson. You play Clemson at home. I have no issues with that. Again, I just picked Florida State to beat them. Then you got to go on the road to play at Duke. Again, Manny Diaz and Malik Murphy, the Texas transfer. I think they're going to be good. Do I think they're going to be this year's version of Elko and Leonard? No, I don't think that at all. Then you got to travel to play at Miami versus North Carolina. At Notre Dame, that's one you might circle there, right? We know what Notre Dame's been. That's going to be a really good matchup. Again, you finish the year off against Charleston Southern and then versus Florida. I don't know where on this schedule you want to pencil a loss in at. I just think that they could they potentially lose the week before they play Notre Dame and then turn around and beat Notre Dame. Absolutely. I do think at least one loss is somewhere on the schedule. You pencil it in anywhere past Clemson you want to, and we can go from there.
Well, Christian, you asked a question. I'm going to tell you exactly where those losses are coming from. They're going 10-2. And it pains me to say that because I did take Florida State, and I want to mention that last year to go undefeated, won me a bunch of money. I was proud of the Seminoles last year. I'm not shitting on them this year, but I think they're going to take a little bit of a step back. Obviously, going undefeated is a big deal. But I'm with you 100% on this. And you're right. I'm going to rattle through a few of these teams, but the Georgia Tech, Boston College, Memphis, Cal, Florida State should start 4-0, in my opinion. They're going to be favored in all four of those games. I think they should win those games. And you said it best. They're going to have time to gel, right? And I think the SMU game is going to be tough on the road. Now, I know people are laughing. Well, SMU just joined, the Power 5 not too many years ago, and now they're in the ACC. I think SMU is going to have a good season this year. They're actually not a bad football team. I believe they won the AAC last year, so coming over here is going to be a little more difficult. But I think they're going to be a tough team. But give me Florida State in that one. Now, I did pick Clemson to beat Florida State. I'm sticking with that. I think that's going to be a tough game. It was a great game to watch last year. Came down to the wire on a missed field goal. Duke, you mentioned it. Duke doesn't scare me. The Miami game it should be a good one. This reminds me of the early mid-90s days, back when both teams were really good back then. And I think Miami's going to be really good this year, and that should be a good game. But give me Florida State in that one. North Carolina, we've talked about them a little bit. They don't scare me at all this year. And then the big one is at Notre Dame, and that's where I think Florida State drops a game. Could they win that game? Yes, but at Notre Dame, I think it'll be tough, so I got to lean Notre Dame on that one. Charleston Southern, and then you got Florida to wrap the season up. Who the hell is Florida? I honestly think, like I said, Christian, I have 10-2. This schedule is a little bit easier than Clemson's, in my opinion. But there's no reason why I don't think that Florida State. I think Norvell's a good coach, and I think they can win some games. And you said it best. They're to start the season off, man, is huge. They don't play really any powerhouse, kind of like Clemson starts the year off with Georgia and some of these other big name teams. So, Christian, I want to ask you a question. What's the floor? What's the ceiling for Florida State this season?
Great question, Chris, by the way. I think it's the floor for them is 8-9 wins. And I know it sounds very strange to say that, especially with the success that they had last year and just how that incredible run that Florida State went on last year, right? They were a team of destiny. And we were robbed of seeing them play really a meaningful game, I think, at the end of the year in the playoffs. So, but again, I think 8-9 wins. I mean, there is a way where, again, I do think they're going to get through the first half of that schedule unscathed. But then you've got Clemson. I mean, Clemson's fired up. They're pissed off. Could they go on the road in Tallahassee and steal one from them? They could, right? Miami, same thing, right? They have to play Miami at home. Now, it's not a long road for them to travel to get to Miami, but Miami's pissed off and they're fired up, and Mario Cristobal needs to do something with all that talent that he's recruited to Miami, right? You play North Carolina at home. Mac Brown, I like him as a coach. I don't know what they're going to be this year. It's going to be really interesting to see. And then you got Notre Dame, right? Notre Dame, they're an interesting team as well to me that I think could potentially pencil them in as a loss. Charleston Southern, I'm not worried about them. You look at Florida. Potentially, you as you go down this schedule, I mean, there is a way that you could see, hey, maybe they lose, 3-4 games, right? I think the ceiling for them is they go undefeated. Okay. I think that's a fair enough thing to say, right? On the flip side of that, they could go undefeated. If they get gelling early and the transfers that they picked up and some of the depth pieces that they had last year, right, having to replace guys like Braden Fisk and some of their defensive players that they've had start to gel real early and they get off to a hot start. Who says they can't beat Clemson? Who says they can't beat Notre Dame, right? The rest of the teams that they're going to play, they should absolutely curb stomp. So, I think Florida State, I'm riding with the Seminoles this year. Again, to hedge my bets, I'm going 11-1. But what about you, Chris? Let me flip that over to you. What's the floor? What's the ceiling?
No, I'm on the same boat as you are. I don't know if they can go undefeated again. Even if you do go 11-1 during the playoffs, that's a great season regardless. That's kind of what it's about this year, since with this new 12-team playoff structure. But I'm with you. You know, that bottom half of the schedule there does get pretty tough. You got Clemson, Miami in there, Notre Dame. Florida probably won't be an easy game, even though I shit on Florida all the time. I actually think a lot of this season is going to ride on if that defense can be as good as it was last year, and if DJ steps up and plays really well, and or they get a couple receivers going, I think Florida State's going to have a great year. Like I said, we talked about them a ton last year. They were a fun team to watch. But yeah, I said, like, worst case scenario, probably 8-4. I don't see him doing anything less than that, Christian.